Well, I think the Eagles certainly will look into the possibility of getting him. I mean, they should, considering their need for having a number one cornerback. Now, I'm not saying that's what he's going to be, but he's certainly an above-average cornerback, and a lot of it's going to depend upon how much he can get on the open market. Now, that that number I threw out there was basically the number that was thrown out to me by people close to him, and maybe they're setting the bar pretty high. I think ultimately maybe $9 million a year. The Eagles really haven't paid a cornerback that much since Asante Samuel, but there's a new regime, and maybe Chip Kelly looks at what they did 2 years ago in the offseason, getting Bradley Fletcher and Kerry Williams. Maybe maybe it's about time we invest a little money in the position, because right now I don't think they have any other options after those two. If they don't bring back if they don't bring back Fletcher or Williams, Brandon Boykins in the slot. I don't think Nolan Carroll's the answer. I don't think Jalen Watkins is the answer, and I don't know if they're going to find the answer in the draft. So they're going to have to do something in free agency, and you might as well look into one of the guys to be one of the top free agents on the market.
Now, Maxwell, obviously, do you think he's a good fit for what Philadelphia does? I was talking about this earlier. Williams and Fletcher, they were brought here because they were bigger, physical guys. Do you think that they liked the system that Billy Davis ran here, and would Maxwell fit into this system?
Well, to answer your first question, I do think Maxwell will fit in. He's long, he's rangy, he's over 6'1", he's got long arms. You just look at the way he stands. He reminds me of, he reminds me of Williams and Fletcher in terms of his body build. He can play press man. He can tackle against the run. These are requirements almost in Billy Davis's defense. So I think, I think he could fit in that way. In terms of whether Fletcher and Williams liked the defense, I think, they like that they're being asked to play press man. They like that they're, occasionally have zones thrown in there. These play to their strengths, but I'm not sure if they were happy being put out on an island all the time. Now, I think there's pride there, and they feel like they can man up against any wide receiver in the league. But the reality of it is that there are receivers that they can't keep up with, and we saw that increasingly over last season with Jordy Nelson and Des Bryant just toasting Bradley Fletcher.
Jeff McLane of the Philadelphia Inquirer. The Eagles have a lot of questions going on. Do you think corner is their main focus this offseason? Is that the position that they want to fix the most?
I would have to think so. They got to do something about outside linebacker, because they don't know if you don't know if they're going to bring back Trent Cole at $11 million, which they're not going to do. But whether they ask him to take a pay cut, maybe he comes back at that number. But he's going to be 33. Next year. Brandon Graham is going to hit the free agent market, I'm pretty sure, and I think it's very unlikely that they'll be able to afford him, especially at outside linebacker. So with Marcus Smith, his development kind of stunted, and you're wondering where he fits in. They just have Connor Barwin, so that's a position you got to address. I think cornerback would be number one. Safety, I think they still need to bring in somebody. I don't see Nate Allen being back. Quarterback, something they have to look into. I think ultimately Nick Foles probably will be back. But again, as you mentioned, I still think cornerback should be the top priority.
Now, obviously, you mentioned the quarterback position with Foles, and there's some people out there that think that he has some interest around the league. Is the interest going to be mutual? Are the Eagles going to be interested in moving Nick if people are interested in him?
It's silly season now. You'll hear a lot of reports. I'm not saying these teams aren't interested in Nick, and I'm not saying the Eagles aren't interested in hearing other teams' offers. That stuff happens, but is it really going to happen? I think it's unrealistic. What do you do if you trade Nick Foles before the draft? Who's your quarterback? Is it Mark Sanchez? No, I don't think Chip Kelly looks at Mark Sanchez and says, okay, he's going to be our quarterback of the future. Do you look at the draft and say, okay, I'm going to find my answer there? Probably not, because you can't risk not having a quarterback going in a draft when it's very unlikely that Marcus Mariota or Jameis Winston is going to fall to you. Could you try and trade up for one of those guys? Certainly, but that is not a guarantee. It's extremely difficult to pull a trade-off like that, and even if you want to pull it off, maybe you look late in the first round at Brett Hundley. Maybe there's another guy in the second or third round, Bryce Petty, et cetera, but those aren't guys that you can say that you can plug in and play and have them start right away. And most likely they're not going to be starting caliber quarterbacks in this league. So to me, I think it's like 95% chance that Nick Foles will be the quarterback on this team next year.
Jeff McLane, Philadelphia Inquirer, Jeff_McLane on Twitter. Jeff, before we get to some of the other pieces that are going to be happening this offseason, what is, in your opinion, the situation with the GM role now? Is this a stable situation? If you're a team and you need some help in this offseason and you look at the Eagles front office, do you think that this is a well-done structure with what they've done with Howie Roseman? Who knows what he's doing? Do you look at the Eagles right now as a team that is going to be good to deal with in the offseason happenings that is going on right now?
Well, I mean, Chip's got to fill the GM role, obviously, or whatever they're going to call it. Maybe it's going to be director of player personnel, something like that, because essentially the personnel executive won't have GM responsibilities in terms of handling all contracts or having final say on personnel, which all GMs don't have. It's not like it can't work. Right here in the Super Bowl, Pete Carroll and Bill Belichick have similar power structures. They're the ones with control and they have final say. And they went out and got lieutenants that they trust, Nick Caserio in New England and John Schneider in Seattle. So everyone keeps saying that Chip Kelly will only get a yes man. I'm not sure that's exactly what he wants. I think he wants a really good evaluator. I think he wants somebody to come in and draft board for him, with knowing what types of players that he wants for his scheme. I think he wants someone that understands the league and how to pull off trades and how to evaluate free agency, et cetera. That being said, it's not a position where some of these guys that are in position to become GMs and have perhaps a lot more control than they would have in Philadelphia. It's not one that's probably that attractive, and that's why we've seen several candidates either not want to get interviewed or ultimately decide to stay with their teams. Like we found out yesterday with Scott Fitterer of the Seahawks, and we found out earlier with Brian Gain of the Texans.
I know, obviously, a lot of people think it was a slam dunk that Jeremy Maclin would be back. Jeff, what is your thoughts on Maclin? With this, a pretty good wide receiver class here. I mean, maybe some teams have to overpay. Is Maclin going to be one of those guys that gets a deal that he can't refuse?
I don't think it's going to ultimately get to that point. I think the Eagles have been negotiating with Jeremy. I think they certainly want to retain him. I mean, is it going to get to a number where they kind of back off and say, you know what, we're not willing to pay him that? I mean, that's always a possibility, but they also have the franchise tag that they can use on Jeremy if they want, which would keep him here for another year. And I think one way or other, whether a contract gets done or whether they use the franchise tag, I just think I see Jeremy Maclin coming back next season.
Do you see any problem with McCoy coming down the road here?
I don't. We can't rule it out. He's going to have a big, very high cap number, but I think the willingness that he has expressed of, being open to renegotiate his contract, maybe do something that gets that cap number down. The fact that there may not be a running back out there for the Eagles to replace him with. I don't think Darren Sproles is an every down back. I don't think Chris Polk is reliable enough in terms of his health of being that type of guy and even skill-wise. So, to me, I think ultimately LeSean McCoy returns. But, again, you can't rule it out because last year, if you would ask me if Deshaun Jackson was back for 2014, I would have said yes.
Jeff McLane, Philadelphia Inquirer, with us here, 97.3 ESPN. And, Jeff, obviously, no one talks a lot about the offensive line, but is that an area where they need to start targeting this offseason?
Yes. I was a little surprised last year that they didn't draft an offensive lineman. They brought in some undrafted guys. No one really made the team. They have some young options, Matt Tobin, Andrew Gardner still on the team. They'll get Alan Barbery back. But you do have aging veterans, Jason Peters, Todd Harriman, Evan Mathis. I think they'll probably bring the line back as a whole. Maybe Todd Harriman they bring back at a less number and tell him he's got to compete for a starting job, and they bring in a young guard that they see that could potentially start. But, yeah, I do agree that at some point they got to start thinking about what's going to happen when those guys are no longer able to play at the level that they've been playing over the last several years.
Yeah, how about Peters? What is your take on him in terms of how much gas does he have left in the tank? Do you think he was slipping at the end, or, are you concerned with him entering next year that he's not going to be this dominating player that he once was? Does he look like a guy who maybe is hitting the end?
No, I wouldn't say that. He still had a phenomenal year, and early on he really kept that line intact. essentially he was really the only guy that was healthy all season. There were times, he was banged up, but he played through it. Was he as dominating as he was the year before? No, I don't think so. And there were kind of some slips down the stretch, but I don't think that had much to do with skill set. It's certainly something you have to pay attention to. He has had injuries before. He's had nagging ones as well. But I still think you can get one more solid year out of Jason Peters, who still is one of the top 5 left tackles in the game.
Hey, Jeff, obviously, with the draft and the offseason, how about Demko Ryans? Are they going to have an answer on him, or are they just going to have to assume, or are they going to have to do something to, just in case he's not ready? Or are they not worried about him so much?
You have to be concerned because you just don't know. You don't know how this will be the second Achilles tendon rupture of his career. He's over 30. He never has been one of the athletic linebackers in the NFL. He gets by a lot of times on his smarts and his instincts. So you have to have a backup plan. Michael Kendricks will be back. Najee Good missed most of last season, and he'll be back. And you have a couple other options there at inside linebacker, but I think you have to get someone that you say, you know what, if Demko isn't ready, we need a middle linebacker, essentially, just in case if, not only if he comes back, but just in case if maybe something happens again.
All right, Jeff McLane, obviously a lot of people suggesting the Eagles are going to do whatever they can to get Mariota. What is your stance on that? Is it even worth doing? It's worth doing if you can do it at the right price. If you don't have to give up, the whole fortune, then you do it. But most likely they're going to have to give up a lot to get them. I do feel like at times that I know that Chip caters offense to the skill set of his quarterback, and I do think that he can win different ways. But I think ultimately his system would thrive most with a quarterback that in which there is a threat to run. And Mariota certainly would bring that to the team. But again, I really just sense that Mariota is going to go number 1 to the Buccaneers. There's a couple of things that they did in terms of the coaching staff that seems to me to set it up that way. And I think that for the Eagles to even get into that spot, they're going to have to mortgage the future. And I just don't think that, maybe Chip's willing to do that because he's now in control. But I just think it's way too much to give up for a guy that really, honestly, you're not so sure about in terms of his skills. All right, Jeff McLane. Of course, the Eagles have a lot of stuff going on, a lot of questions to be answered. We'll check it in. Jeff_McLane, the Philadelphia Inquirer, Philly.com. Always a pleasure, Jeff.
All right, thanks for having me.